All right, guys, are there any questions over the assignment so far? Any questions over the one homework assignment from Thursday? Because it was 3 through 10 from 3.1.
I tried doing it last night and I kind of went blank. You can do like number 3 first time.
Yeah. So what? So let's look at it.
I don't even know where it's at, to be honest with you.
Right there. Yep. 3 through 10.3 through 10. So this here is problem number 3, and what we want to do is factor it completely. Now, whenever we factor these, the first step is to find the greatest common factor and factor it out, if there is one. Because in some of the problems, some of the times we factor, there's not going to be a greatest common factor. But if there is one, we want to factor it out first. Okay. So, looking at this here, we're trying to see if there's a greatest common factor first. And if we look at 3x squared, 3x, and 6, there is one that is 3, because 3 will go into all 3 terms. And if we factor 3 out of 3x squared, we're left with x squared, plus 3 out of 3x would give us x, and 3 out of 6 leaves us with 2. Our second step is our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. So for this here, guys, so we have our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now the third step is to find the sign. If the sign, guys, up here, is positive, if the sign of the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. So if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. Now, if the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So if we look at this here, yeah. So looking at this one here, the third term is -2. So the sign is negative. If the third term here is negative, the signs are opposite. So one is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. So we set this up to go from here. And these make more sense the more that we do. So that's step 3. Now step 4, find the factors of the first and third term. Find the factors of the first and third term. And last but not least, we check. Step number 5 is going to be check to make sure we have it set up correctly. So our next step is to find the factors of the first and third term. And in this case, our first term is x squared, and our third term is 2. We're not worried about the signs of 2 because we already put them in. We already put the signs in. Now, when we look at the factors of x squared, what times itself, or what two things multiply together to give us x squared? X and x. Now for -2, we're looking for what two numbers multiply together to give us, or not -2, but just 2. What two numbers multiply together to give us 2? 2 and 1. There's only one set. And last but not least, we check to make sure we have it set up correctly. So when we check, we could do the x times x here, and then x minus 1, and then 2 times x, and 2 times -1. But we don't have to do all 4 of these, because x times x is what? X squared. But where did we get the x and x from? Well, we got it from the x squared, yes? Where did we get the 1 and 2 from? The 2. So the first two, x times x and 2 times -1, should get us back to x squared and -2, because that's where we got them from. The main ones that we're focused on and are really going to look at are the x times -1 and 2 times x. Because we can multiply it all the way out, but x times x is x squared. That's where we got x and x. It's from x squared. Now if we check this here, x times -1 is 2 times x is going to be plus 2x. And -x plus 2x is positive x. Is that the middle term that we wanted? So that right there is the answer. Because the x and x, because you're saying it doesn't have the x squared or the -2, yes? Where did we get x times x from? X and x from? X squared. So we could go through and check the whole thing. Come on. Because I could multiply through and say x times x is x squared. Then we have minus x plus 2x, and 2 times -1 is -2, which would give us x squared plus x minus 2. But where did we get these two x's from? Well, they're the factors of x squared. So those two should multiply back to be x squared, because that's where we got them from, yes? Because again, the first terms are what? The factors of the first term. So where do we get x and x from? We got it from x squared, so these two should multiply back to be x squared, because that's where we got it from. 2 and 1 are the factors of, so they will multiply back to be, because that's where we got them from, yes? So does it really matter doing x times x and 2 times 1? Well, no, because factors are multiplied together. Because the real thing we're focused on is the making sure the middle term matches. So we'll do this here and this here to make sure that we get the correct middle term. We can multiply the whole thing out. Doesn't make a difference. But we get this here. But we're just following those steps. And this isn't new. You all done this in Algebra 1. It's just been a while. Now, when we look at this next one here, 8x squared minus 56x plus 48. This is on the nose. Step number 1, greatest common factor. Is there a number that will go into all three of these here? Well, we could check what? 8, yes? Because we can say 56 divided by 8, which is 7.
Yeah.
And
6 times 8.
So 8 will go into all three. 8 is the biggest number that will go into all three. And we'll factor it out. We divide it out of each term. So 8 divided out of 8x squared is going to leave us with x squared. If we divide 8 out of negative 56, well, we didn't do anything with the sign. So it'll stay negative 7x. And as we've said, 48 divided by 8 is 6. Questions on this so far? Now when we factor, so that's step 1. If these are going to factor, we're going to have 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now once you get more used to this and comfortable with it, we don't necessarily need the 3 spaces. I have y'all write the 3 spaces mainly so that you can space those parentheses far enough out so that it doesn't look like everything's really crammed in there tight. And we know 2 of them will be signs. And we look at this here, so the signs. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Because when we do this here, and I know there's a lot written here, let's get the eraser out. Erase all this here, all this here. Clean this up a little bit. Clean this up. Now this is kind of going the other way, and I don't think I talked about this on Friday or Thursday, but when we multiply these two together, our constant term, so here the 6, is really coming from these two numbers being multiplied together. Yes? Well, if one of them's positive and one of them's negative, a negative times a positive is what? A negative, yes? So it's telling us if this sign is negative, I know that the factors have to be what? One positive and one negative, yes? That's where we get the second part of this. If the third term's negative, the signs are opposite. Because that's the only way we can get a negative number, yes? One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Now, if the third term is positive, which here it is, yes? What's a positive number times a positive number? Positive number. What's a negative times a negative? A positive, yes? So if the signs are the same, negative and negative or positive and positive, we end up with a positive, yes? Okay, that kind of makes sense. But here, it is a negative, and we do the whole multiplication out. X times x is x squared. 2 times x times negative 1 is negative x. Plus 2x minus 2, yes? But then what do? We add these two middle terms together, yes? Well, here they're opposite, so the sign really doesn't make a difference. But let me just say that this is plus, plus, and plus. We said they were all positive. Well, then we take these two and add them together, yes? Well, say if they were both negative. Well, a negative plus a negative is still a negative, isn't it? Because if we multiply negatives, they become positive. But if we add two negatives, they stay negative, yes? So what this third step is, and what makes it really nice, is that we know two negatives or two positives multiplied together give us a positive, yes? But whenever I add two positives, I still get a positive. If I add two negatives, I get a negative, yes? So the middle term, which we're adding those two numbers together, either both positive or both negative, tells us the sign. So here, since the third term is positive, the signs are the same, and they match the sign of the middle term, which here is, so both signs are negative, or minus and minus. And this here, I think, is very, kind of really helpful, because the only other way for us to do this is to look at all the factors of 6. So that would be 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. But that's not it, because we could also have -1 and -6, or -2 and -3, because all of those work for +6. But here, by doing this one step, we take out that. We take out that step of having to look at the positive and negative. It just tells us. So, any questions on step number 3? But really, we don't even have to go that deep into it. We just need to look and see, is the third term positive? If it is, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If it's negative, the signs are opposite. Which takes us to step number 4. Find the factors of the first and third term. The factors of the first term, factors of x squared, are x and x. Factors of the first term go in the first spot in each of the parentheses. And really, if there's only one set of factors, go on and just throw them in. X and x, there's only one set, one possible setup, so we throw those in. Factors of 6, on the other hand, are 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Which one do we want to try first? We can do 2 and 3 first, and then 1 and 6. So we can plug 2 and 3 in. Now we need to check. Well, we don't necessarily need to check the x times x, because that's x squared. That's where we got it from. The 2 times 3 came from factors of 6. As long as we factor these correctly, we really don't need to check those. Because the main one that's going to change, possibly, is the middle term. Our x times -3 and -2 times x. X times -3 is -3x. -2 times x is -2x, which gives us -5x. Is that the middle term? Now, we could flip the 2 and 3. It would be the same. Now, flipping the 2 and 3 might be helpful if the number in front of x wasn't just 1 and 1. If they're not the same number, then it might actually change it. But here, it does not. So we'll need to go with what? 1 and 6. Well, x times -6 is -6x. -1 times x is -x, which gives us -7x. Is that the middle term that we wanted? Yes. As the middle term that we want is -7x. We're not looking at the original one, because the original -56x still has that factor of 8 plugged in. But if we wanted to, 7 times 8 is 56, and it's negative, so it is the correct middle term. Now, on all these here, if you do factor out a greatest common factor, you have to include it in your answer. It is a part of the answer. So just turning this in as x minus 1 times x minus 6 without the 8. On the homework, we'll see, I may not take off too much for that, but that would be a whole point on the test if it's asked for factoring. questions on this here. Let's look at this next one here. 14x squared plus 31x plus 15. Is there a greatest common factor that goes into all three? No. So that means we just move on to step number 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Okay, that takes care of steps 1 and 2. Step number 3, signs. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Well, here the third term is positive. So the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which is positive. So we have plus and plus. Okay, well, that takes care of steps 1 through 3. Now we need to look at step number 4, find the factors of the first and third term. So we can look at 14x squared first. Well, what do we know about the factors of x squared? They're going to be what? X and x, yes? We can go and put those in. So, looking at the factors of 14, which is 1 and 14, 2 and 7. And that's it. 3 doesn't go into 14 evenly. 5 doesn't. And that's about it.
Can we do whatever?
We would want to keep these as rational numbers if possible. So we try to stay away from fractions or irrational numbers. Now, we technically could get irrational numbers as factors, but most of the time that does occur, we almost solve it and then work back to this to get those. It's not as easy to find the factors if they are irrational. More or less, you would solve it and then get it back to factored form. But at that point, it's meaningless. Now, factors of 14. We just need to pick one to work with because, again, the last step we're going to do is check. So we can use 2 and 7. And we'll just throw those in. So we pick 2 and 7. We're going to try those first. Now, the factors of 15 are 1 and 15, 3 and 5. 2 doesn't work. 4 doesn't work. And that's it, because it'd be 4 and 4-point decimal. So with 15, do we want to do 1 and 15 or 3 and 5 first?
1 and 15.
Okay, let's do this here. So 1 and 15. And the last thing we need to do is to check. Now for us here, 2 times 7x is still 14x squared. 1 times 15 is still 15. In a lot of books, I will say, will tell us we need to multiply it all the way through to check it. We need to do 2x times 7x and the 1 times 15 included. But if that's where we got them from, there's not a whole lot of reason to do it. So if we do 2x times 15, that'll be 30x. 1 times 7x is plus 7x. And 30x plus 7x is 37x. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. Okay. We can flip the 1 and 15. Because since the first term's not 1 and 1, it would be a little bit different. I don't even think we need to technically check this one, because 7 times 15 is way bigger than 31, and that's going to be 5, carry the 3, 105x plus 2x is 107x. I mean, it might work if the signs were opposite. There's a chance we could pull that number back down, but unfortunately, it does not. We can change it to 3 and 5. And I'm just plugging them in. Now 1 and 15 aren't necessarily out, because it could be 1 and 15 and 1 and 14, because they still have a chance there, as long as these don't work here. So if we try this one here, 2x times 5 is 10x. 3 times 7x is plus 21x, which gives us, is that the middle term we wanted? So there's your answer. And again, the more that you do these and the more that you look at these, you'll start seeing some different patterns that occur, or start seeing how may be the best pattern to set these up. Questions on these here? Yeah. (2x squared minus 7x plus 5). Is there a greatest common factor between 2, 7, and 5? No. 5 and 7 are both prime, so no. Two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. We want to find the sign. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here the third term is positive. So the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So we would have negative and negative. Now we need to find the factors of 2x squared and 5. Well, x squared's only factors are what? X and x. Okay, we can put that in. X and x. What are the factors of 2? Yes, sir.
Never mind. That was it.
So 1 and 2. But what was your question? I want to.
It's not a verse.
No, I want to hear it anyways.
I was gonna ask if there would always be a 2 with the x squared.
Or the 2x squared?
Yeah.
Yes. There is only one other arrangement for them, for x squared and x. For x squared, because we have x and x. But we can also have 1 times x squared. That's the other arrangement. Now, I normally don't bring it up because we could not technically have this. But that means whatever number here is going to be just a number, yes? And the number for this one here is either 1 or 5. But for that first set, we have what? 2 minus 5. That means it was just a greatest common factor. So for us here, having that setup is never possible. We can only have x and x. Because otherwise the first set of parentheses, just 2 numbers, they would subtract out. And it just meant that there was just a greatest common factor instead. Does that kind of make sense? And I think you were talking about for this here, one of them is going to have it too. Now the other one has 1. We don't have to write it in. Now the factors of 5 are just 1 and 5. Where do we want to put the 1? First or second? It doesn't matter because, again, we can plug it in and check it. Two times negative 5 is negative 10x. 1 times negative 11x. So what do we want to switch? Now, if we check it this time, negative 2x times negative 1, or 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x, which gives us negative 7x. Is that what we wanted? Mm-hmm. So, these here are the factors.
Instead of erasing it like video.
You can see what I did wrong.
Yeah.
flip the signs.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we could do that.
Yeah. Because essentially when you flip the signs, it's just changing both.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this here?
No. Can we do one that has a negative with the 8?
Negative with the 8?
5. I was just saying like the negative here.
Okay.
Because we did
Taking this straight from the assignment.
Oh.
What number?
Number 8. So if you want to write this on your note paper and then convert it over, you can. Or you write on scratch paper. So this is number 8 from the homework. Because I feel like y'all are getting the hang of this, yes?
Yeah.
Now, when we look at this here, we look for a greatest common factor first, because that's always what we're going to look for. Now, the greatest common factor doesn't necessarily have to be a number. It could be a variable. So if we had r cubed minus r squared minus r, or plus r, there's an r in each one, there's the same variable in each one, we can pull it out. We won't encounter it for this chapter, because we're only going to deal with r squared. We're not going to deal with r cubes. We'll deal with that next chapter, but that could be a greatest common factor.
We're so excited.
Now, is there a number that will go into all 3 of these here? 3 will, but 9 will go into all of them. 9 factored out of 9r squared is r squared. Because you can start with 3 and then see if there's any more that go into it. Now, 36 divided by 9 is 4r, and 45 divided by 9 is 5. So we have r squared minus 4r minus 5. So at this point here, we'll have our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. Looking at this here, the third term is. And if the third term is negative, our signs are opposite. So one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. Now, which one we decide to put the positive in and which one we put the negative really doesn't matter. I just need to pick one. Normally, I put the first one positive, the second one negative. We could do it the other way as well. Because again, our last step is to check it to make sure it works out. Now we're going to look at the factors of the first and third term. Well, the factors of r squared are, well, r and r. Just like with x, the only way we can get x squared is x and x. Here, r and r. Now we need to find the factors of 5, which are 1 and 5. Now, just kind of making an example, I'm going to put it this way here. R plus 5 and r minus 1. Now we can check this here. And again, we're not so much going to check r times r because we know it's going to be r squared, and the same for 1 and 5. Now r times negative 1 is negative r. 5 times r is going to be plus 5r. And negative r plus 5r is positive 4r. Is that what we wanted?
Yes. No, negative.
We wanted negative.
So switch positive on the other side.
Now, for this one here, switching the 1 and 5 would work. Because the numbers in front of r are what? 1 and. Now, if there had been another number in front of r, and we got the correct number but wrong sign, we would have to flip not only the 1 and 5, but the numbers in front of r. So instead of doing that, we can flip the signs. Because whenever we get the correct number but wrong signs, go on and just switch the signs. Because what that's going to do over here is it's r times 1 is going to make this positive r. Negative 5r, which gives us negative 4r. So if we get the correct number but wrong sign, we can flip the signs and it'll fix it. And this here is helpful, especially when the number in front of r is not 1. Because if it was, if we had 2 and 7, we would have to flip the 2 and 7 and 1 and 5 to get it to work. It's just easier to flip the sign. But that's it. Questions on any of this here?
Would you take the homework if I worked it out on separate pieces of paper and just turned you in the answers?
Yeah.
I didn't know if you would take that on sheet.
No. Now, I do want to cover at least one more. Yep, because these are all the same. I want to cover one more of these here before we finish. Because this one here is not adding a ton to it. It's only making one little difference. Let's look at this one here. So this one here, we want to factor negative 4x squared minus 8x plus 5. Is there a greatest common factor between these three here? Have we encountered one where the first term is negative? I'm going to factor the negative out. I want to pull a negative 1 out of all three terms. Because if we can make that first term positive, it's going to make everything a lot easier. So if I take a negative out of negative 4x squared,
Is this on the homework?
this is on the notes.
Is there a negative one?
So if I take, guys, if I take a negative out of negative 8x, the negative becomes positive. And lastly, if I take a negative out of a positive, it becomes negative. And the reason that I do this, guys, the reason I do this is because for this here, if we were to leave the negative in, we would have to look at the positive and negative cases of 4x squared. But if we pull that negative out, it takes it away. We don't have to worry about it. And we can do the same steps we've been doing. So we look at the factors of, so we'll find the signs first. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Well, here the 5 is negative, so our signs are opposite. Now we're finding the factors of the first and third terms. Well, 4x squared, the factors of x squared are x and. Now the factors of 4 are 1 and 4, or which one do we want to use first? 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? 2 and 2. Now the factors of 5 are what? 1 and 5. Now last but not least, we can check it. 2x times negative 5 and 1 times 2x. Well, 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. 1 times 2x is going to be negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8x. Well, we got the correct number, but not the correct sign.
So we just swap the signs?
So we switch the signs. So we're going to make the first one negative and the second one positive. And that's it. And that's it for today. Any questions on these here?
So as long as we have the negative in front of the parentheses, right?
So you'll still need the negative just like with the greatest common factor of a number. You'll need that. Now, if we had a number and a negative in front that was working, we'd pull both out. So if 2 was a greatest common factor and the first one was negative, we'd factor out a negative 2.
I have so much better days whenever math is easy.
The math is hard that week. Like